Hey all you whiskey fans, stop me if you've ever heard this. That smells like citrus breeze sort of rolling down a hill. There's a little bit of ginger, crisp but fresh with some malty balance. The palate speaks to me. It is so refined and cultured. Blah, 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 blah. You get it. It's not real and it doesn't make sense to you. This also, sadly, isn't where it stops. You might also see a bottle, and Method and Madness is an amazing bottle of whiskey. Nothing against them, but just to kind of give you an example of what I mean. The nose, based off of what they're writing, and by the way, this is the single pot stilled Irish whiskey matured in bourbon and sherry barrels, finished in wild cherry wood. Here's how they describe the nose. It's box hedge clippings, coconut fibers, shredded ginger. Taste, fresh green herbs, black tea, pot still spices, and the finish is a long and fresh, prickly spice and toasted hazelnut. I guess I haven't had enough toasted hazelnut in my life to be able to tell you yeah or no, but it's a really extravagant, interesting depiction of their whiskey. I don't even agree with everything that I read on the label, and I don't think necessarily that anybody who has not been blending or been trying to develop such a flavor and taste can even do that on their own either. Now, there is a difference, however. I'm not trying to say that anybody who is producing or, let's say, pinky up in the air tasting a whiskey actually is making all this stuff up. There are some things that make them more able to pick up certain flavors and aromas than maybe you can. But that doesn't mean you can't learn to get to that level. Nobody, and I mean nobody, picks up their first glass of whiskey, whether it looks like this or like this, and starts spitting out what the guy before was saying. No, it is an art and a challenging one at that to be able to really get to be able to make the connections to flavors and whiskeys. You might have heard the term olfactory glands or olfactory recognition. This is, without getting too complicated and into the weeds, your ability to smell and taste. Then there's the topic of how many, the volume of these glands that you have. Because if you have more or you have less, maybe this changes your ability to pick up scents. What kind of brings all of these things together is not your abilities. It's not even how well you've got your skills. It's how good are you at actually putting these words together to describe what you're tasting. So the first couple steps are, hey, what am I tasting? What am I kind of feeling? And the second skill is being able to verbalize it. Don't get this wrong. Whiskey, and in different parts of the world, it is even more extreme, is a language. When we are tasting, saying things like the nose, the palate, the finish, these are different aspects of a language. And over time, you start to pick up these things, and there's so many YouTube videos you can watch about people talking about it, and it's like learning another language. Although, theoretically, it's in a language you probably already know, there's some nuance to it. It's not just your ability to smell, but it's more importantly, the ability you have to connect what you're smelling with the words that you are saying. This is even more important because there have been many studies done on whiskey experts. And what these studies have found is essentially there is actually no difference. A expert, a sommelier anything, is not actually having a genetic advantage to picking up these smells and flavors. It's the skill that they've worked on and they've refined. So they are not smelling something you are not. They have not been able to pick up box hedge clippings. No. In fact, you're not wrong when you didn't pick it up. What they have been able to do is figure out what these smells, these detailed little bits of an aroma, remind them. Maybe that day they were clipping the hedges, and that smell is something that they've really focused on. And then when they had this whiskey brought them back to that moment. And instead of thinking, oh, that can't be right, they're just going with their gut and they're throwing it out there. I guess this is also an advantage of being a so-called expert. Probably nobody questions you. But if you walk into a room and taste something and you say, reminds me of lemon drops, and everyone just looks at you and says, no, dude, no way, you're wrong. Get out of that room. You're drinking whiskey with the wrong people. Because what you smell and what you taste is only for you. As long as you're enjoying it, nothing else matters. And the experts that sit there smelling, wrong glass, smelling some enhanced things and saying some fancy words, that might be true for them. It might not be a lie, but that doesn't mean that you are not capable of getting to that level if you want to. And more importantly, you are not wrong if you do not smell and taste those things. Now, let's say that you are on your whiskey journey and you want to get to that level of a so-called expert. I by no means am one that can sit down here and name out and taste and smell all these things. But from those which I know, which are, I would say, further down this journey, what amazes me about what they can do is, again, their ability to connect smells and things that they've had around them and they've focused on. These guys, again, they're training. So if you give them a Coca-Cola or a coffee, they are drinking this coffee and they are telling themselves, coffee, 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 coffee. And this helps kind of build in and connect that smell, that aroma, that taste to coffee in their brain. So when they smell a whiskey that probably has some darker roast in it, they might be able to pick up and make that connection to coffee. There's a bunch of really good tasting sets out there too, which I'd heavily recommend. These are by no means necessary. They're usually quite expensive, but you could honestly just go to your grocery store, pick out caramel, chocolate, kind of whatever these, I mean, don't go with something that's like this, like box hedge clippings and coconut fibers, but go just pick up some of these things, these aromas that you might have heard are in some whiskeys. In fact, if you want to challenge yourself even further, you might watch a video from XYZ YouTuber or read a label on the back of a whiskey and think to yourself, hey, let me go out, buy these exact same aromas and see if I can smell that and then smell it in my whiskey glass. Really interesting, cool tips and tricks to train yourself to better identify the aromas in whiskey. Once you have built up kind of this library of different things of what these aromas are, then you can start to work on building the different individual categories of what these things or what these flavors can be. I'll give you some basic examples. You've got a whole bunch of different types of apples. Yellow, red, green, so many different flavor profiles, and they all taste and smell a little bit different. It's the same. This could be a Granny Crisp apple to you, and that could be like a sour green apple on the other side. And you should be able to, over time, be able to distinguish the two. That's one thing. Could be chocolate notes, could be oak, could be different levels of smoke or roast. Very common if you're drinking bourbons is like caramel and honeys and these sweeter notes. But that's one thing. The second thing is to learn more about how whiskey is being produced. In my opinion, this is where I am the most, let's say, strongest in my palate, because as I make whiskey in March Distilling, I'm very aware of the processes and the steps and the different ingredients that I'm using to try to create different flavors. And because I've kind of hyper-focused on this creation aspect of it, when I taste or experience something which is aligned with something I'm doing, or maybe completely the opposite, it's very interesting for me to figure out, hey, did they get here by doing what I'm doing? Did they do something different to get to the same spots? And this is where kind of I advance. Don't worry, you don't need all three of these to be great or to enjoy whiskey. You need none of these to enjoy whiskey. You need good whiskey, and you need the right place and the right people around you. That's it. When you want to take it one step higher and try to get more into the whiskey game, don't just go out and buy the most expensive whiskeys you can. Build this unrealized talent of yours and then start to push the level and see what more and more you can find and better appreciate in a good glass. Just to recap, you are a whiskey expert, and if you think you're not, you can be. You just got to work on it. It's a skill just like anybody else, and maybe there's a small level of advantage somebody else has over you, but that doesn't mean that your ability to learn about production or to be able to connect and combine to remember different things, whatever your gift is, cannot be associated to making you a more appreciated whiskey expert. Just enjoy it, have a good time, and do it with the right people around you. That's, for me, the most important thing. It's the environment. It's this capturing of a moment of this spirit, which makes it very, very interesting. With that, I leave it to you. Cheers, whatever glass you're drinking out of, whatever you're drinking, however you're focusing or in just taking it in. Cheers to you, you soon-to-be whiskey expert, if you're not already. Bye now.